You're listening to a Brawl Network production. This is a podcast for the best fans in the NFL.
Are you in the Mafia?
Am I in the what?
It's time for a Bills Brawl podcast.
Second down and 7. Kelly with the time. Touchdown! Bill Brooks.
Allen. Deep shot. Touchdown! On the line to Stephon Diggs.
And Thurman breaking tackles at the 22. Inside the 10. Touchdown Buffalo.
All right, let's talk some football, Bills Mafia. Mike Lindsley back with you for another episode, and you can get us at Bills Brawl and at Network Brawl on Twitter, and me on Twitter as well, at Mike L Sports. Let's get into really a full breakdown of the 2021 schedule. We did it with Scott Petoniak, going to do it here with the longtime Rochester Buffalo Bills journalist Mike Catalana. We're going to get into the schedule. I want to talk Josh Allen contract. I want to talk a little bit about rookie mini camp. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that have been going on recently with the Bills and McDermott, addressing the media with Corona and all the other sort of things that are really hot topics here as we move into June, get closer to July. And what we're hoping for is a pretty normal training camp, really, and then into a 17-game NFL season. I think the Bills maybe are around a 16 in that 17-game schedule. I think that they're about a game or two less than what they did last year during a 16-game schedule is what I was going to say. So let's get him right now on Twitter, at Mike Catalana, 13 Wham, and Fox Rochester sports director, BuffaloPlus.com for more as well. Mikey, welcome back, bud.
Good to be back with you again, Mike.
So I'm talking to you just off of some calls with Bills players and coaches. They addressed the media today. What was discussed? What were the hot topics? What were some of the takeaways that you heard?
I will say this. Anytime you talk about the COVID vaccine, people sometimes get very partisan, and I understand that. And it is a personal choice. But I will tell you this. If you're a Bills fan listening to this, NFL fan listening to this, it's an issue. It's going to be an issue this season. Last year it was COVID in general. This year it's the vaccine. Sean McDermott got a lot of questions about it. He was very open in his answers, at least in terms of himself and what he would like to see. It's a little different for the players. So what I would tell fans is it's an issue because it does impact the team in the facility and potentially on the field. So, yeah, that was a big topic. Sure, there were other things. First day of OTAs. It was a little less about, who's starting, where everybody is, because they're not going to talk about that. But, Mike, I will tell you, the COVID vaccine thing is a real issue for teams this year.
And we had rookie camp a couple of weeks ago. Guys were able to showcase themselves. And I think early, again, it's easy to just get out there months ahead of the season and say, wow, look at it. It's almost like those pro days and the combine and all this stuff. Guys in shorts and a T-shirt. Wow, look at how good they look without a defense against them, this and that. But by the same token, you can have a look test for a lot of guys. And to me, early, at least some of the clips I saw, and I'd love to hear your take here, but man, Boogie Basham and Greg Rousseau, maybe even here, Brandon Beane got a couple, didn't he? These guys look like freaks.
Yeah, they do. Athletically, these guys can both really play different styles. And you know how I'm looking at those two? Is I'm looking at how they will impact A.J. Epinesa from a year ago. Yeah. Because I really liked A.J. He was the guy I predicted they would pick. I thought they'd have to get him in the first round. They got him in the second. And I thought, okay, this guy is going to have an impact. And I still believe he will. But if you're A.J. Epinesa, you're not blind to what they did. You're not blind to what you've seen and heard about those two guys. Come on, they draft two defensive ends in the first two rounds, and you're a defensive end. So it's competition, right? It's what you want. These guys, these three could be the future of that position. That's what they're hoping for. So, yeah, while it's one thing to see these guys come in and rookie camp and they're the only ones there, it's better that they look good than not look good, and it's better that they look like they belong physically. And I think you're right on both of those guys. Early returns. Now, as Sean McDermott will say, look, we just want to get them out there. We want to get them acclimated, all those things. But early returns are pretty good on them.
What do you think the Bills are hoping to accomplish for OTA season?
I think it's honestly getting back into that off-season mindset. They're not gonna have everybody there all the time. The one guy that he singled out today, only because he was asked that question, and it was kind of interesting, was that Star Lotulelei was not there. And again, it's I tell everybody it's an organized team activity. Some people think it's considered optional. It is optional, but that's not in the title. And Star's a veteran; he's been around. But he was out all of last year. He took the year due to COVID and did not play, and I think they would be counting on him, certainly based on his contract, to come in and help for this year. But what do I think they're trying to accomplish? I think they want to get that mindset going early on. The plus for this team, even though we talk about these new guys coming in, Mike, they have a ton of continuity.
Mm-hmm.
They really do. So I think it's getting everybody in the building when they're there. I think it's just that mindset for the whole year. Some teams are coming in, new coaching staffs, ton of new players. They're using this to just say, let's get to know each other. This team, for the most part, knows each other, and I think they're excited to be on the field together. And I think that's really what Sean McDermott is looking for. And I think he's thrilled to have him in whatever form in the building. The percentages, I think he said today that maybe there was 70 players. I'm trying to remember the exact number that were in the building, in the facility. So that's good, because what it was like maybe a month or so ago. There was all this talk of all these veterans not showing up. I don't want to get into daily attendance, because it is optional for the players. But I do think they've got a pretty good retention of guys coming into the building and working out.
A few more from Mike Catalana on Twitter, at Mike Catalana, the terrific Buffalo Bills insider, TV man for 13 Wham and Fox Rochester sports director, as well as BuffaloPlus.com. Mike, just a few more to hit on here. And one of them is, I'm just very intrigued by training camp this year, not from a Corona standpoint, but is it at St. John Fisher? Is it at One Bills Drive? Is it something in between that they're going to try to look at? What was said today, and what do you think is going to happen with training camp across the board? And media, fans, they going to be there? Are they looking to hold it in a bigger spot, smaller spot? What does training camp look like a few months from now?
Well, I'll start with this. I asked the question of Sean McDermott today because we reported a few weeks ago the Bills and Fisher working on a plan dealing with the protocols of the league. I'll tell you this. It's either at Fisher or it's at the Bills facility.
Sure.
I don't believe there's any other place they would go. There's no particular reason to go. They have a phenomenal facility in Orchard Park. They can stay there. Sean emphasized again today, he loves taking his team on the road. It's what he's wanted to do. Heck, he wanted to do it a year ago, and the league shut that down. Now, this year it's different. This year, the league is allowing it based on them putting together a plan for what they're going to do, and then having the team accept that and then say, okay, we're going to go to St. John Fisher for this period of time. What I asked him today was, would there be protocols in place that would make you change your mind on that? And he didn't really say that was the case, but I do believe they've been checking everything out. If there are certain things that I believe Sean McDermott then weighs and says, I love coming to Fisher. I love taking my team away. But if we have to do X, Y, and Z because we're out of our facility, I'm not going to do it. I think it is football first. Like, this is not 10 years ago where it was marketing first. This is football first all the time for Sean McDermott. In terms of what it means for the fans, I will say this. I've been told that the percentage of players vaccinated is part of the protocols that the league will be looking at in terms of letting teams leave their home facility. So I'm sure in some way they're dealing with that with the league. What fans would be allowed to do? Is there a chance you would actually have camp at Fisher with no fans? I guess. That's not priority one for them, but if they're going to do that and it was that restrictive, my guess is they would just stay in Orchard Park. But I'll emphasize this again. Sean McDermott likes it. Brandon Beane likes it. They want to take the team away. I think if they can do it and make football first, I think they will.
2021 schedule. What do you like? What do you dislike? Anything in between?
It's funny you phrased it that way. I like the beginning. I like the end. The in-between is tough, and that's because they've got 3 or 4 at home early, and they've got 3 or 4 home late, and I think that's great. They got some stretches there where they are not in Orchard Park for a while. And, I like where the bye comes. I like that bye after back-to-back primetime games. Now, look, they're both on the road, right? But then they get the bye. Then I believe they have New England at home after that. I think they also have Miami coming after a bye, or coming after, not a bye, one of their pseudo buys when they played on a Thursday. So I think the extra time will always help in that way. I mean, we already knew who they were playing, and there's always pluses and minuses, and I say this all the time, and my guys get tired of hearing me say it. It's not always who you play, it's when you play them.
Sure.
Sometimes you're catching a team that's banged up, or they just had a brutal game, or they have a big division game the next week. But here's the thing. The Bills have the better quarterback on the field in probably 90% of the games, and the rest of them are pretty close to a toss-up. I'll give you Kansas City just because it's Mahomes. But for the rest of them, it's pretty much a toss-up. So when you look at it that way, when you take the better quarterback on the field, everything else plays into it. But I think that gives you the ability to go anywhere and win. So I think the schedule's good. I think, like I said, there's moments, but I like the start and the finish at home.
When is the Josh Allen contract coming?
He was asked that again today. And, of course, what would you expect Josh to say? He's like, that's not what his focus is. I think they'd like to get it done this offseason. I really do. I think it helps the team in many ways because it's an extension. They can manipulate the cap hit based on the signing bonus, which we know is the key thing, right? You look around the league, when the Eagles signed Wentz and the Rams signed Goff, they were thinking big things. Now they're both on other teams. Now, I'm not saying that's what you think about Josh Allen, and he had a spectacular year for the Bills. But it does play into it. And the funny thing about, the Wentz deal was, the deal hadn't really kicked in before he was already traded. So when you do it on the early side, it can be problematic as well as being, can be a really good thing for them. Look at Dak Prescott. I mean, God, that got franchised and then got hurt, and he's back and he got his deal. So it can work either way. I'll say this. It's going to work out for Josh Allen, I believe, no matter when something happens, because he's that talented, and I do not see the guy taking any major steps backwards. But I think the team would like to get it done sometime this offseason. I think if it's going to happen then, I think you'd see it happen right before training camp, so sometime in the next month. But it could extend at that point. I mean, realistically, Mike, he has 2 years left on his deal. Mm-hmm. He's got the 4th, and he's got the 5th. They've got the franchise tag. They got a lot of options, and he's still going to make a lot of money. But I think there's a good chance it happens this offseason.
We obviously know that they're bringing him, the band back together. It's been stated. It's been, the evidence is there. They've signed all these guys back: Williams, Milano, Feliciano, McKenzie. They're sticking with Levi Wallace. I mean, it goes on, the long line. Out of the guys they brought back, what one do you think will end up being the most impactful?
That's a really good question because you can look at it. I would say this. He was the surprise last year, and I think based on where he's playing, I think Darrell Williams is going to be very impactful for them. I think he's the kind of guy. Now, we know they drafted some, quote, projects this year, and they're looking for some guys to come through. And Darrell got that deal with the Bills, but you know how those deals go. I mean, it's funny. When I look at last year, he was a footnote. It was like, oh, they signed Darrell. It's Darrell Williams.
Most people didn't even know who he was.
Right. He's that guy. Well, then he played, and it allowed them to make some changes. And it's going to allow them to really see what they have in Cody Ford. They're very excited about Cody being back and healthy this year, so let's see. But I would say I really am interested in seeing how he plays. Of course, Milano is going to be impactful, because he is such an important player to them. But I just think Darrell Williams, because it is the group that, we've seen them solidify it, but everything being done with that O-line, maybe outside of, Dion, has been, we like, we don't love. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like, even Mitch Morris, they can get out of it. And the same thing with Feliciano. Like, These are deals that, see where they are. They like those guys a lot. I think Darrell Williams has a chance to be even more than that for them.
It's crazy. The Bills were 1 win away from the Super Bowl, and it was, oh my gosh, you got to go get pass rush. You need a tight end because you got to get to Mahomes, and you got to have a tight end like they have a tight end in Travis Kelce, and it's a copycat world, and how do you keep up with KC? And let's face it, the AFC, the Bills are going to need to stay ahead of everybody else too. Not many teams were able to do what Bills fans want. Only one team stopped Mahomes, and it was in the Super Bowl, and that was Tampa with the pass rush. I didn't really see anybody stop Travis Kelce. I didn't see anybody really produce like Travis Kelce from the beginning of the season to the end. So I'm getting to a question. Do the Bills really, going into this year, with the success they had last year, bringing everybody back together, and I know the wins and losses will be where they are, and they'll probably come back a little bit because it's so hard to stay up at that level. But does this team really have a true hole on the team?
I don't really think so. I guess you could say, still second corner, right? And I like Levi. And what I love about Levi is he's always been that guy, the walk-on, right? The undrafted free agent, opposite of Trey, right? He's that guy. So would they ultimately like to replace him? Yes. But I love the fact that the guy keeps fighting to hold on to the spot. But you could argue that that is a spot. And you could argue that tight end, let's see what Dawson Knox does, is still a place where that's another spot for a weapon, right? That's another spot for not just a good player, but a weapon in their offense. But their offense is really good. They scored over 500 points. You want to see more of a pass rush. You want to see him get to the quarterback more because that's the surest way to get it done. But since I've been covering the team, and I'm going to say post the Super Bowl years where they had very few holes on those teams, they haven't been anything close to this in terms of what they have. We sort of look at the running back spot and go, you could use a home run hitter there. This is what we're talking about now. Where it used to be, they got a couple of good players and they're trying to build around them. Now they've got good players all over the field. They have depth. They have young guys. But I will say this, Mike, when you look at the entire team, the spot where they've put the money and the draft picks, and I believe has been the most underperforming based on that, has been the defensive line, right? Because after all of this, you could still make the argument that Jerry Hughes is their best player on the D-line, and that should not be the case because they've put a lot of money into the guys they've brought in. They drafted guys, like Ed Oliver. They drafted A.J. Epinesa, now 2 picks early in that round. They really want to fix that. So I think they put the assets there to see if it can grow as a group. But in terms of individual positions, I'd still say weapon at tight end and second corner.
All right, final one for you in the minute or so I have left. September 12th, Sunday, Pittsburgh Steelers, Orchard Park, New York. Have you grasped any kind of a thought for you specifically covering a game with a full house again in Buffalo, considering that we know that the stadium probably would have blown apart last year just from sound if the fans were there. But have you envisioned, have you thought about, have you crystal balled it all, Mike, with a full house and being there again and just that atmosphere? And it should be week in, week out in Buffalo this year. Have you thought about it?
Yeah, and here's what I thought. Last year I went to the AFC Championship game. It was in Kansas City, and they had a decent crowd. And that was kind of interesting to see because it was the most people I had seen in a stadium in the year. So we got into this mix where it was nobody. And then it was the small amount, which was so cool at the playoff games because that was like what we could hope for. But you know what it takes me back? It'll take me back, and this is the game I've been thinking of. I grew up near Philly, going to Eagles games. We had tickets to the games. I sat in the stands, and it was fun, right? You would see it. You got a sense of it. But I'd never experienced anything like my first Bills game that I ever covered in Orchard Park, September of 1988. They played the Vikings. And back then, as a reporter, I was able to be down on the field during the game. I've done it preseason doing the games and on occasion. But back then, we were able to do it. It was Thurman Thomas's first game. This was when this team was just taking off. And I got to tell you, I have never experienced anything like that in my life. I mean, that crowd was so loud and so dynamic, and they just throttled the Vikings. And I'm standing there on the field going, I don't know how a visiting team can play against this. And it's Bruce Smith, and it's Darryl Talley, and it's Thurman, and it's Jim Kelly. And you're like, wow. And I sensed it. And we were coming off a strike year. If you go back to that time, and It was weird, and then they came back. So the excitement for the fans is, to me, going to be like walking on that field in 1988 and just being blown away by Bills fans and the passion they had for the team. And I love that it's the Steelers, because I think that's a great fan base.
Me too.
And I know they'll have some fans there, maybe not as many as they normally could get in the place, but they'll have some fans, and it's a great matchup. You could call it a rivalry. I wish they played more, but that's the game I go back to, and I can't wait for September to see that.
I love it. 13 Wham and Fox Rochester sports director, the Buffalo Bills insider, the TV man, longtime, of course, BuffaloPlus.com for more, at Mike Catalana on Twitter. Mike, thank you a million. As always, really appreciate the time, and I'll be getting you back on both the pods here as we near the season, my man.
That sounds great. Enjoyed it, and looking forward to a big year for the Bills.